Our next session is a panel session which is led by Dr. Aous Abdo and Dr. Alma Gonzalez. This panel session will focus on the future of learning, industry, and research perspectives. I would like to introduce our first panelist, Dr. Alma Gonzalez. She is the founder and director of Strata Learning Corporation, a global talent development firm. Dr. Gonzalez holds a PhD in Strategic Studies from the Nanyang Technological University, Singapore, and an MSc in Education Management and Development from a Mexican institute. She is a certified professional in talent development who researches the future of learning and specializes in transforming advanced scientific discoveries in a variety of fields into practical knowledge and skills that maximize human potential. With her, we have our second panelist, Dr. Aous Abdo. He is the founder and CEO of Analytica Data Science Solutions. Dr. Abdo established analytics data science solutions to help clients develop the full potential of the AI and data science fields. Prior to founding Analytica, Dr. Abdo led astrophysics research teams at NASA and the Naval Research Laboratory in Washington, D.C., as well as research teams in nuclear physics at Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico. Dr. Abdo is a well-renowned scientist with over 24 publications and 2 books in advanced data analytics, machine learning, and AI. As a reminder to all our attendees, this conference is being recorded. We will have Q&A at the end of this panel discussion. Please use the Q&A tool if you have a question for the panelist. Over to you, Dr. Gonzalez and Dr. Abdo. Now you both can unmute yourself and we will start the panel session. Judy Zhang will moderate this session. Thank you.
Well, Dr. Aous Abdo and Dr. Alma Gonzalez, I am so happy to welcome you both to our panel. Some of our attendees might remember Dr. Gonzalez's presentation yesterday on older adult learning, and I hope that you'll also tune in to Dr. Abdo's session tomorrow on AI applications and case study. That's tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So this panel is about the future of learning, which is really central to the theme of our conference, which is experiential learning for all. So before we get into the questions, I'd like to start with both of your backgrounds. So I was wondering, can you share your background and how your career led you to research and to thinking about the future of learning and training? Maybe Dr. Abdo, you could start us off.
Sure, yeah. So my name is Aous Abdo. I'm the founder and CEO of Analytica Data Science Solutions. My background, as you mentioned, is in particle astrophysics. I got my PhD in 2007 from Michigan State University, and later worked as a research scientist at NASA. After my 5-year tenure at NASA, I was recruited to work at the Pentagon, mainly for the US Navy and the US Army. And in 2015, I established Analytica Data Science Solution after I saw the great need in the market for AI-related work, because I wasn't really satisfied with what I saw from some of the companies providing service in this space. Prior to the end of any part of my educational and professional life, to be honest, I felt like I had learned all there is to be learned in that stage of my life and stage of my career or my educational path. Only to learn later on when stepping into a new stage that this was far from being true. I learned over the years that we live in a world where continuous education paradigm is the new norm. One has to keep learning to adapt to this new reality. I found that once you stop learning, you become irrelevant and will be kicked out of the workforce sooner or later, since again, you become irrelevant if you don't continue your education journey. In the summer of 2013, with a master's and PhD in physics, and 24 peer-reviewed publications and 2 books, I decided I need to learn more. I need to get a master's degree in AI from Johns Hopkins, which I did. And it took me roughly 2 years to achieve that goal. In 2014, I discovered that on-demand learning through Coursera and DataCamp and other on-demand sites, and that was honestly a game changer for me. Even my company, we have subscriptions for our employees to continuously learn from these platforms. And even I'm recommending these online platforms to relatives and friends who want to bridge the gap between the skill set they have and what the market is demanding, what the market's asking for. Thank you.
Well, Dr. Abdo, I really like what you said about continuous learning journeys, and I absolutely agree how essential it is. And Dr. Gonzalez, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you'd agree too. Can you share your background and how you got into researching the future of learning?
Of course, thank you, Judy. It's great to be here again, and good day, everyone. Well, I'm Alma Gonzalez, and my background is in social science. I did a bachelor's degree in international relations, then I did a master's degree in international political economy. After that, a PhD in strategic studies. And when I finished my doctoral research, I had a very thick dissertation that I had spent around 4 years researching and writing. And my supervisor told me, what you can do with this is just write a few academic papers, and that's it, essentially, for some, experts scattered around the world to read them, and pretty much that's it. And I was not happy about that, because I thought that my dissertation contained valuable knowledge. It was on technology management, in particular, international technology transfers in the defense and aerospace sector, and I had conducted lots of fieldwork research with industry practitioners, and I knew that they really needed this knowledge to improve their performance at work, professional and also the organizational performance. So I had the idea to turn my PhD dissertation into corporate training programs. And that's how I started getting into the learning and development field, because prior to that point in my life, I had no experience, in learning and development, and I didn't have any at that point. I had to learn everything from scratch, from the very basic, to develop these training programs, and I did it, and I managed to sell these programs to major corporations in the industry. So I was very happy about it, and I realized, oh, this is my passion in life. I want to do corporate training, development initiatives for the workforce. So from that point onwards, I've been fully immersed in the learning and development ecosystem worldwide. I've collaborated with organizations of all sizes, from technology startups to Fortune 500 companies, 100 companies in all industries, governments, higher education institutions. And my objective is always the same: to create the most effective learning experiences for people to develop the skills that they need to thrive in their personal lives and also in their professional lives. So that's what I've been doing. I got my own firm, a consulting company. We develop and deliver training programs for workforces. And I also do consulting on learning and development. And something that I've been very focused on recently is university industry collaboration, because being an academic myself for so many years, I understand the language of higher education institutions, the needs of the academia, but I also know corporate needs and understand the business imperatives. So I act as a bridge, between both stakeholders, educational institutions and the business world. So I work on collaboration projects with them as well. So I'm very happy to be here and looking forward to a great exchange of ideas with Dr. Aous and the audience here.
Thanks so much, Alma. Well, it sounds like both of you actually have really strong backgrounds in defense and in working or researching with government or government entities, as well as with higher education. Now, these sectors are not really known for being technology for or being kind of up to date with the latest technology, at least in the popular imagination. One generally thinks of them as being a little bit behind the times. I know that may not actually be the case, but I was wondering if you could share a little bit about how the approach to learning or training might be different in these areas compared with the corporate or business worlds. Maybe Dr. Gonzalez, you could start us off.
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I didn't get it.
Sure. So in the defense, government, higher education sectors, I think usually people think of them as being maybe a little more behind the times, not as up to date as the business world. So that may not actually be the case, but can you talk about how it might be different thinking about learning and training with governments or higher education compared with the business world?
Of course, actually, certainly there are differences, key differences. The speed of change, government institutions, higher education institutions tend to react in a slower pace, compared to the business world. But I think in terms of technology adoption, both face the same imperative. Both are trying to meet the needs of the same market, and trying to make the most out of the talent that they have. We all are here in the same boat, trying to do the best work we can with the resources that we have available. And if there are differences in the way that government and higher education institutions approach the transformation, in particular technology transformation, and the way the business world does it, it has to do with their internal processes, the culture, and the way they are used to doing things, but not with the technology itself, and certainly not with the contextual conditions. So both these kind of organizations are trying to adapt as best as they can, to the current demands of the market. That's what I've observed.
And before, Abdo, I turn it over to you. One thing that I did hear was that from a friend who works in the industry as well, that sometimes government, for example, just can't go as fast, just cannot change as fast as, say, the corporate world. And often it's for a very good reason. If a company, something bad goes wrong, they adapt a technology and that, adoption goes badly, well, it's not going to affect the services of, millions of people the way that it would if something in government were to break down. So maybe that slightly slower change, slightly slower adoption is for a reason. Anyway, Dr. Abdo, I do want to give you a chance as well to maybe address the difference between corporate training versus government or higher education.
Sure. So in the case of, my company, we work with the government and with the private sector. And one of the main reasons we see between the two entities really is, I'm talking about the federal U.S. government, is how big the U.S. government is. And so if we have a big organization like the U.S. government, making any changes, adopting new technologies, training, etc., it's not as easy. And don't forget about all the bureaucracy that goes into it. So we do training, for example, for the federal government, Department of Homeland Security. We did training for for private sector. Even getting the government to agree to do the training takes a lot longer time than it compared to the private sector. So bureaucracy in the government in general, and although they have a lot of money, allocating that money for training and education is not that easy of a task. So that's what we observe.
Thank you. So I'd like to just turn to one of our first questions, which is, how have learning pedagogies and methodologies changed over the years? And I guess you could, maybe talk about maybe a longer time span over the course of the last 50 or 100 years, or even just more recently in history over the past few years. Dr. Abdo, would you like to start with that one?
Sure, yeah. I believe for the past decade or 2 decades, we have been seeing a big shift in learning methodologies in general. I believe, from my own observations, the catalyst for this change might have been, Khan Academy, the introduction of Khan Academy back in 2008, which really revolutionized the way people learn. With the introduction of video that you watch and you can pause and rewind and fast forward and watch over and over again, the student can no longer suffer from missing a topic in the classroom, which is what I used to suffer in school. And this is one of the reasons I hated school and college, honestly, is that I had a trouble, paying attention to the class, to the instruction in the classroom. Should I pay attention to what he's writing? Should I pause and try to understand what he's saying? Should I write it? Should I not? So all of this was really solved by the introduction of, YouTube learning by Khan Academy back in 2008. And that revolutionized the whole field. The spun off, e-learning platforms such as Udemy, Coursera, Udacity, of course, YouTube, among many others. This has provided the medium, I believe, through which a student can learn a topic at their own pace. So on demand, you don't have to, be in a classroom and pay 100% of attention to the teacher or the instructor. This has greatly, I believe, changed the way people learn. Many companies, including mine, as I mentioned, have agreements with these e-learning platforms to allow their employees to benefit from these resources. In the sense, I believe these platforms pave the way for the what I call the continuous learning paradigm that we are all now following.
Thank you, Dr. Abdo. Dr. Gonzalez, what are your thoughts on how learning pedagogies or methodologies have changed over the years?
I think this is one of the major challenges that we as educators face currently, because I don't think they've changed enough. If we talk about the methodologies themselves, we see lots of new technologies, resources, and tools. But the way we deliver these tools, the way we integrate them into the teaching, and learning processes are not effective enough, And I've witnessed it at higher education institutions, but also in the corporate context. It's like when very basic technology like PowerPoint was introduced. How do educators use it? Just as a replacement of the blackboard, And that's something that we are doing with new technologies. They are integrated as part of the delivery of new content. But the real challenge here is how can we really make a strategic use of them to enhance the learning experience of participants or students in any training or educational program. Because what I've seen is that the delivery tends to be the same. I don't see a lot of transformation. I see new tools, new resources. But what we really need to do is to upskill the educators, the trainers, in the effective use of these resources. That's what would really make the difference. I see a lot of delivery that is a stage on the stage kind of delivery, the expert talking, and delivering content, and that we can trace back to the Middle Ages, And it's a shame that we don't maximize the potential of the technological advancements that we currently have to completely transform learning as it's experienced by participants of the training programs. So that's the current challenge we have. Evolve, pedagogies, but not only pedagogy, also andragogy, the study of how these adult professional learners that are part of the workforce can maximize the use of technological resources to enhance the way their brains learn. That's the key challenge. And for that, we need to develop more effective learning and teaching methodologies.
Dr. Gonzalez, that actually brings us back to your session at EXL 2021 last year, where you were talking about, how humans can be trained so that they can perform their work better and not just be robots, right? We don't want human employees to be robots because that's easily replaceable. Well, exactly. I do want to get back to kind of the idea of upskilling, kind of getting back to our conference theme of experiential learning. But first, I do want to ask both of you, what do you see as the biggest technology changes affecting how students and workers learn? Dr. Abdo, would you like to take that one first? I know you mentioned Khan Academy. But would you mind going a little deeper into that?
Sure. I think really, honestly, the biggest change I've seen in my field that affected me personally and affected my colleagues and my employees is on-demand learning and the ability to not need to be in a physical setting in a college. Again, as I mentioned before, we're continuously learning. Even me myself, I had a master's and PhD, and I had to get another master's, and I'm continuously learning new things, new technologies, new tools. So I think the biggest impact I have seen in our field is really this on-demand learning presented by some of the websites I mentioned, and I think it's a great tool that helped a lot of people even bridge the gap. A lot of people during the pandemic, we all had so much free time on our hands, stuck at home. So I have coached a lot of people who were interested into sort of moving into the data science and AI field from the IT field or related other fields, engineering or math. It was relatively easy for them to bridge that gap and learn new skills and new technologies, new languages, programming languages, that is, that allowed them actually to move on from where they were into another field, and making a lot more money as data scientists. Some of them were mathematicians, some of them were pure IT field, some of them one of them was working at the an engineer, chemical engineer in Canada, some oil mining field in Alberta, Canada. So I think that there was really the biggest change I have seen. Even my nephew, he's 20 years old. I signed him up for account at Udemy and Data Camp, and I already hired him 2 months ago to work on for me and my company. We give him the final product that is basically a product we want to deliver, and he touches it with make it prettier, easier to interact. So he does more of the UI part. And again, he's overseas in a country, which is Jordan, where working is not that easy, and he's now making good money working for me. And it all was due to the fact that he was able to access a lot of learning material online, mostly for free.
Well, I have to agree with you, Dr. Abdo, that it certainly makes it easier for people to switch careers or maybe consider a new career that they otherwise wouldn't have access to because of on-demand learning and online learning.
Yes.
How about you, Dr. Gonzalez? What do you see as the biggest technology changes?
I think it has to do with the kind of learning, right? With the kind of knowledge and skills that learners want to acquire. When it comes to cognitive skills, theoretical knowledge, I find that learning analytics is a key innovation. The ability that we as training organizations have to deliver personalized learning pathways that match the needs of individual learners. I think that's fantastic. The way we can use data to really customize and tailored learning solutions so that people don't have to waste their time and energy with content that is irrelevant to them, that adds no value, that doesn't improve their performance, or that is not aligned with whatever objectives they have, and with their learning styles, the different levels of ability, and all the characteristics of individual learners. So for me, when it comes to cognitive, theoretical knowledge, I think learning analytics are fantastic. I think they're even more important now and will be so in the future. And when it comes to practical skills, for example, for manufacturing sites, where we have to train workers into how to operate in dangerous contexts or complex environments, I find that virtual reality, augmented reality, extended reality are very, very useful technologies because they allow us to maximize the learning experience without actually being physically there on site where workers are going to develop their activities. So the ability to immerse a learner into different scenarios virtually is a game changer, for our corporations as learning places, but also for the learners themselves, that regardless of where you are based, you can experience reality in a virtual context that will familiarize you for the real life situation, in advance. So for me, I've seen it in action, and it's amazing how we can recreate the real world in virtual contexts, and how easy it is for learners to simulate situations in virtual environments. So those are technologies that are really driving the way we learn, and we'll be doing so in the future as well.
Well, I can't agree with you more that, simulated environments or sort of live environments in a kind of practice environment are really important. And, that's the heart of what we do at Extreme Labs. Now, Alma, you mentioned data analytics, and I definitely want to get back to that later because I know, Dr. that's a big part of what you do too, with data analytics. But first, Dr. Gonzalez, I want to dig a little further into what you mentioned just now about customized learning paths. This may be more of a general, maybe philosophical question, but customized learning paths are very hot right now in the training industry and in the learning world. At what point, does it make sense for students to benefit from sort of a broad general education that's the same for for a larger audience versus digging into what they specifically want to be learning about that's different from others?
Well, general knowledge is always going to be there, you know. It's not the content itself, but it's the way we deliver it, you know. More than general, it's standardized. You know, there are standard programs for everyone. And the problem now is that if I want to gain expertise in certain area or field, I may not need to go through the entire curriculum as offered by an educational institution because I already have a background or because I am learning this at work. And I only have some knowledge gaps that I need to fill. So it's a waste of my energy and time to go and enroll in a program that is going to take me years, maybe, to complete, if I can just fill the gaps by having a personalized learning experience using technology. So while it's true, you know, that we all need to have the background in a discipline, in any area. If I am already an adult learner, you know, and I am employed working, you know, my gaps are very, very specific, and that's when personalized training comes in, you know. But if I am, you know, an undergrad student, of course, I need to go through standardized content that will give me the broad understanding of my area of study. But even then, you know, if I'm still an undergraduate student, I have a career vision or a plan, you know, that it's unique to me. And in that sense, I can also personalize my learning experience by focusing on the key areas where I know that I want to develop my career. So it's undeniable that we all need to have that background, standardized knowledge. But as we advanced in our learning journeys, we tend to require content that is customized and tailored to fill our own gaps in knowledge, understanding, experience, and skills.
That's a great answer. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it's true as you get older, as you pick up that background knowledge, that those gaps in your knowledge become smaller and smaller. So why waste the time going over what you already know? Yeah. So let's get back to that that question about data analytics. So you know, if you want to do research on learning and training and trying to figure out what was most effective, and maybe, you know, partner with some employers or training organizations, what kind of data would you want to get from them to understand how effective learning is, what the future of learning is? Maybe Dr. Abdo, you could start with that.
Sure. I mean, in that case, you know, one thing that I would start with is look at the gap or gaps between the skill set of an organization and really what the market needs are, and you know what the training organization has to offer. So I would look at data I would like to look at or get from the employer, or the skill set of their employees and how it maps or compares to those required by the current and future projects that the organization will be tackling. If there are any gap between these skill sets, if there's a large gap in this skill set, I would ask that I'd like to know that the organization is open to outsourcing some of that work to cover the existing gaps, or are they willing to spend really time and energy and money to train their employees to bridge those gaps in the skill set. And this is what we frequently do. We see a new technology emerging that we need to integrate in our workflows, and it's a new technology that none of us knows. So we set a budget and a time frame for an employee or a group of employees to learn. Those are with the skill set that is closest to fill that gap, and we spend the time and energy and money to fill that gap.
I want to continue along that vein of thought, Dr. Abdo. So there's a lot of fragmented and scattered data in the world. I don't think anybody would say that we don't have enough data. We do have a lot of data. It's just a matter of how we use it, how we sort of clean it up so that it's actually usable. So how do you go about synthesizing these data streams that you get into actionable insights and actual tools that you can help with organizations?
Actually, the problem is sort of the opposite. We have too much data in the world, right? I mean, we're generating, petabytes of data daily as humans, and most of that data, as you mentioned, is actually unstructured. So there's structured and unstructured data. The structured data is what we all know, when we look at the Excel spreadsheet or CSV file. This is sort of the nice data to deal with and easy to sort of analyze. The unstructured data comes in the form of free text, like a tweet or a book, text from a book, or media images or videos, and those are much harder, honestly, to analyze. So in there's some field in the AI called unstructured data analytics that help us make use of the sorts of data, this type of data. Specifically, there's a subfield called natural language processing, which is NLP. And what this does is allows us to convert this free text data from surveys, for example, or from tweets. It allows us to convert it into more of a structured data format that we can then infer insights from. Using NLP, natural language processing, we can measure things like the sentiment of a sentence or a tweet. If a client is complaining about something, a couple of days ago, I had a problem with the company, so I sent a tweet, sort of an angry tweet about them, and they immediately responded. They have their NLPs detected that I wasn't happy, so they offered to help me out. In the case of for employee survey, this is something we do a lot. Employee survey, it's surveys usually how happy are you with such and such. So it's like a scale of 1 to 5. But usually companies allow their employees to provide text data about their managers or their workspace and so forth. So in that case, we take that data and we are able, using NLP, to measure how the workforce at an organization are feeling. Are they happy? What issues are the employees complaining about? What sort of things makes employees more productive or less productive? We look at things that the employees would like to see improvements, such as office space, meetings. A lot of people complain about meetings, managers, compensations, food choices at the cafeteria, etc. So all of this comes in the form of unstructured data that we using NLP we will able to actually convert it into insights. And we don't stop there, really. This unstructured data, we merge it with other types of data sources that might affect the workforce at an organization, for example, especially when it comes to HR analytics. For example, now with the pandemic, one of the major issues we're all facing as employers is the fact that a lot of people are leaving the workforce. Employee attrition is at 20-year all-time high, and that costs millions of dollars for an average a medium-sized company in the U.S. So we look at other features and other data sources. We look at the descriptive features about the employee, age, distance from home, gender, etc. The department they work at, job level, how many years they have been at their current role, compensation, stock level options. We look at so many different types of data to try and predict if an employee is about to turn over and leave the company. So it's a tidy task of looking at the whole picture, unstructured data, structured data that will help you make sense of all of really what you're trying to predict or achieve.
Well, you just covered a lot of ground, and I heard lots of buzzwords there: NLP, data science, structured versus unstructured data, how to take unstructured data and make it structured data. I don't want to get too far into statistical or modeling methods here. I don't know if our audience will be quite ready for that at this point, maybe later on in this panel. But I do want to get back to asking Dr. Gonzalez about kind of a similar question. You're also a consultant. You also work with many organizations that have data, and your job is to take that and then give them tools and insights that they can work with. How do you go about thinking about that?
by being very strategic, we have to know what we want to measure, and what's the purpose of it all. At the end of the day, in my field, we want to improve performance, and we want to help organizations achieve their strategic objectives. Now, what kind of data in the overflow of data, can help us make better decisions, develop better training programs? That's really the question that we need to answer, right? Because as you both mentioned, we live in a world of information. Data, unscattered or scattered, organized and unorganized, it's out there for us to make use of it. So I start by being very specific about what is it that we want to achieve, measuring the right indicator and creating the right solutions, but always aligned with those strategic objectives. And something very important, scientifically valid and reliable. That's key, because if the data that we have does not support us to really move the indicators that we want to move to achieve our objectives, then it's not useful at all, as good as it might be. So being strategic is fundamental, and being very selective, and don't try to measure everything, and collect data for all different purposes. Being selective and strategic will really make the difference.
Okay, perfect. That's a really good point. We can do all the work we want to do, but if it's not delivering results, what are we really doing here? Yeah. Okay, so my next question is on some of these buzzwords that Dr. Abdo mentioned. There are so many trending methods, so many kind of hot technologies right now, whether it's AI or machine learning or NLP, as he mentioned, deep learning, etc. So how do we wade through which of these is important? How do we wade through which ones are going to impact the greatest numbers of people versus, basically, how does an individual go about thinking, okay, which ones do I need to educate myself on? And, what are some ways to kind of organize how to think about them? Dr. Gonzalez, would you like to start with that one?
The technologies that you mentioned are certainly buzzwords even for me, so I think Dr. Aous might be more helpful in answering this question because he's more familiar with this kind of technologies.
Sure. I mean, okay, those are buzzwords, but they are, they are affecting us in a great ways daily, and I will go over these in my talk tomorrow. But if you have a mobile phone, if you interact with the internet, you pretty much are experiencing deep learning, machine learning, AI constantly. If you shop on Amazon and you buy something, it immediately would recommend something for you that is relevant to what you bought or what it thinks you would like to buy. When you watch a show on Netflix, it would start recommending things that for you that are sort of in the same category, things you would like. And this is what we call prescriptive analytics. So there are 4 levels of analytics: what happened in the past, descriptive, and predictive, what will happen, what might happen in the future, and prescriptive is how can it affect what will happen in the future. And this is sort of, if you agree with it or not, a lot of the decision making that we humans are making daily are being made for us on behalf of us through algorithms. What friends you're going to be friending on Facebook, your colleagues on LinkedIn, songs to hear on Pandora, movies to watch on Netflix, etc. This is all deep learning, machine learning, AI. It's already involved in our lives. The Amazon helper. When you talk to the Google assistant or Siri. This is all AI, basically interacting with it directly or indirectly. Now, all of these buzzwords and the introduction of any new field for us humans we tend to approach it with intimidation, if I might say. So a lot of people would be, when they hear things like that, they would probably be sort of intimidated about this new field, called AI or data science. And it's not that easy to learn it. It's a sort of interdisciplinary field of, mathematics, statistics, computer science, and domain knowledge. So the first three is something you can learn, from college or from again on-demand online platforms such as the one I mentioned. Domain knowledge is something you would learn in the job sort of. So we work in the defense industry. We meet with experts. We learn about that domain. We work in the energy industry. We meet with electrical engineers and we learn about that field, so forth. So, is it possible? Yes, it is possible. We have helped a lot of people actually bridge that gap and to move into it. But it takes time, and the most important is to, know how to approach it.
Got it. Thank you very much, Dr. Abdo. So both of you have mentioned something about employee attrition. Dr. Abdo, maybe you did that a little more explicitly. I guess, how can we use training tools, and then maybe even some of these buzzwords we were just talking about? I shouldn't call them buzzwords. That maybe diminishes their impact when clearly they are, like you said, all around us already. But how do we just kind of take all these things and maybe remove some of that employee attrition, or make employees more excited to be there because they're being given tools for success? Dr. Gonzalez, would you like to start with that one?
Yes, thanks, Judy. Why people leave? That's a great question, especially right now as we face the great resignation. And employees leave for a variety of reasons. And sometimes we try to create the best environment, and give all the tools for them to be happy, productive at work. And they still leave, So if we want to create a retention strategy, by using learning experiences as leverage, it has to be integrated into an overall, strategy that is intended to achieve this particular objective, to avoid turnover. And in this sense, I've been doing some work on this, and I think Dr. Aous as well. And sometimes there is misalignment, between what people want and what the organization is providing. So they go where they can get it. And that's a very natural human reaction. I'm always trying to find my well-being. But certainly we can use learning experiences, technologically enhanced learning, to retain the workforce, because people are motivated by being more, achieving more. And that implies, of course, learning more. So if we turn our workplaces into learning places, but effective learning places, where workers don't have to separate work from learning, then of course that will contribute to retention, and to avoiding attrition. But that's a challenge, because one of the top reasons that employers mention as a reason why they drop out of learning programs is that they find it difficult to balance education and work. How have we come to that point where these two elements are separated? Because what we want to achieve now in the 21st century is integrated learning experiences. That means learning as part of the workflow. If you have your workforce saying, "Oh, I don't have time for learning," then you really have a problem, because learning is happening as you work. And as you detect that you have a skill gap or a knowledge gap, you should be able to feel it as part of your work. So if you're an organization that has a high attrition rate because employees are underperforming, they're likely underperforming because they don't have the resources that they need to. Now, are those resources due to the lack of knowledge and skills and learning experiences? Then that's where we can fill the gap, but attrition and turnover is a very complex phenomenon. There are many variables involved, but certainly we can, help by improving the learning experiences and the outcomes in terms of readiness of the workforce and ability to achieve the performance objectives.
I really like what you said there, Dr. Gonzalez, about how we really need to have integrated learning experiences because we learn when we work. I think that's just so true. Dr. Abdo, would you like to add to that?
Sure. Yeah. So at Analytica, I'm not trying to advertise some of our products, but we already have a product that we deploy at for different clients that basically does pretty much what Dr. Gonzalez said and adds a little bit more. So when we try to predict why employees are leaving, they usually share with their employer why they are leaving, but usually that is not actually the whole truth. So we look at look at more than 50 features. Compensation is a big thing, but that is not really always the reason. We look at the survey features. We look at the training and education. We look at the descriptive features, age and distance from home, and things like that. That sort of can be quantified under work-life balance, and we found that the training and education is a big contributor to a lot of why some of the employees are leaving. Again, if you're at a job where you cannot perform well because the job requirements and the skill set you have are no longer really relevant to the job that you got 5 years ago, there has been new technologies that you have failed to learn. And the company didn't pay attention to those needs and those those gaps in the skill set, you sort of become irrelevant and you try to move on. That's one reason. So in our case, our product would be able to sort of pinpoint the top 5 or 10 reasons and weigh them, give them weights to why a given specific employee might be leaving. And make recommendations on what to do in the case of educational training. We look at the last time an employee had a training or participated in a conference or a workshop, and we make a recommendation based on that to the employer that this employee, you might want to have a training for them in the next 6 months or so to help them retain that employee.
Thank you, Dr. Abdo. I want to pivot a little bit, moving away from kind of talking more about tools and technology and more talking about like holistic learning and teaching. Dr. Gonzalez, you had mentioned earlier, about effective teaching methods. It isn't just about sort of giving content to students. It's sort of measuring what is most effective for them to build their skills. And so what advice would you give to teachers, to trainers, to reframe how they should be thinking about designing or delivering their content?
Don't focus on the content, focus on the learner, So shift, that mindset where we acquire lots of content and then we see how this content will be presented to the learner, And that's the old-fashioned way to do it. And that's the way many of us have been doing it for a long time, but that doesn't work. Focus on the learner. What does this learner need? What are their learning preferences? What challenges do they encounter? If it's in corporate training, well, at the workforce, if it's outside, in educational institutions, then what intentions do they have? Why are they learning this subject in the first place? What kind of career they want to have? What is their background? Understand the learner at an individual level or as part of a group with certain characteristics, and identify what is the best way this individual or this group will learn this content and how I can be the link between the two, between the content and the learner, but creating experiences that are precisely that, experiences, That means that the learner will experience the content, will live it, will internalize it, will make the content part of who they are. And that is not achieved, by reading the content, or speaking to them for hours. That's achieved by precisely experiential learning, being immersed in the field, being one with the content, and we do that by creating learning exercises, experiences that are designed to ensure that we achieve learning outcomes, but beyond knowledge. Because at the end of the day, I don't care if people really know it. I want to know that this knowledge is having an impact in their behavior, an impact in the results that my business is obtaining, but also the results that they are getting in their lives. Are they having better interactions with others? Are they being more productive? Are they achieving their objectives more easily? Are they happier? Because at the end of the day, that's what we want. And I find that educational institutions measure learning, with standardized tests, and they say, oh, they know it, they can answer all these questions, so I can prove that they really understand it, and maybe they don't understand, maybe they just memorize the content so they know it. That can never be enough. So we need to design these learning experiences to change behaviors, to improve the results that we want, to get the right outcomes, whether that's an impact on my bottom line or that's the impact on the quality of life that this learning is having.
That's a great answer.
That's what we want. It's not learning for the sake of learning or teaching for the sake of teaching. No. What's our ultimate goal? What's our why? And then work backwards to achieve that why.
That's a great answer, Dr. Gonzalez. And a word came to mind when you were at the beginning of what you were just saying, and that was empathy. How is it that you understand what it is that your students need? Why is it that they're learning? And I thought empathy is really key to that, because as you're designing curricula for a student or for a larger group of students, kind of getting into their mindset, understanding the why, as you just said, can really help figure that out. I also really liked what you said about, it's not just knowing. The purpose of learning is not so that you know, but so it's that you can use that knowledge to have impact, whether it's on your life or on your company's results. Anyway, I really appreciated that answer.
Thank you, Judy.
Dr. Abdo, would you like to add at all to that?
I think Dr. Gonzalez covered it very well. I don't have anything to add.
Okay, great. Well, I'd like to go back to research perspectives. Both of you have backgrounds in research, and I was wondering if you could share some of the interesting research that you've maybe seen recently that might relate to effective learning or how to be effective in the classroom or in online learning. What kind of research do you think has had potential lately? It might be new, it might be something that's a few years old, but which you feel like has really gained traction lately. Either one of you can start. I know that was probably a question out of the blue.
Well, I've been reading some reports, not by academic institutions, but by international organizations like the OECD or the World Economic Forum. And I find that these international stakeholders have a very keen interest on education and transforming education, moving us towards education 4.0, and how we can not only, increase our ability to implement technologies and have a more effective learning experience, but also on how we can democratize, education by using technology. And that's an area of research that is the focus, of major international organizations at the moment. So I find that, very impactful, and I think it has great potential because the world still faces the digital divide, so here we are, talking about all these wonderful technologies, and what they can do for us and the future of our organizations. The reality is that most people in the world don't have access to them yet, So how we make education not only digital, flexible, personalized, but also accessible, for the majority of the people on this planet, so that we all can benefit from it, because otherwise it will just contribute to increasing the divide between the haves and the have-nots. So democratizing access to educational technologies is a major area of research, because we know we have this problem. Now, how do we solve it? What are the strategies, the initiatives that we can deploy that can get us quick wins, because technology is advancing so fast and transformations are happening at a rapid pace, So if we don't solve, the access issue, the divide, is gonna just become wider and wider and wider. So democratizing access to educational technologies, that's a key area. And avoiding the digital divide to keep getting bigger and bigger. So making accessibility a key indicator of how well we are doing.
I like that a lot, Dr. Gonzalez. And how about you, Dr. Abdo? What are some of the interesting research that you've come across? Thanks.
I believe, just to comment on what Dr. Gonzalez said, I believe that democratizing education is already happening, and it has had a big impact worldwide. 10, 15 years ago, certain educational resources were only available to certain countries like the US and maybe Europe, but nowadays pretty much anybody can learn anything if he or she has access to the internet and a mobile phone or a computer. So I believe, and we see that a lot in our work. A lot of people have learned new skills in the IT field, in the data science, in AI, and we often actually do hire them, outsource some of our work to countries like, India and Pakistan and other countries. If it wasn't for the democratization of education, this wouldn't be possible. So although the digital divide, as Dr. Gonzalez mentioned, still exists, I do believe it's actually sort of shrinking over time.
Thank you, Dr. Abdo. Well, we are running a little bit short on time now. So as we wrap up, I just wanted to see if either of you had any final thoughts, anything that you'd like to discuss regarding the future of learning that we haven't hit upon before. Dr. Abdo, would you like to go first?
Sure, yeah. From my point of view, somebody who runs a company and is constantly navigating through new technologies and changing, field, I think everybody needs to pay attention to the market needs, because the market gets what the market needs. I'm talking in terms of skill set, and pay attention to your what you can offer as an individual, and how it compares to what employers and others are looking for. So really stay vigilant and adopt the continuous education paradigm, because that's the way it goes.
Thank you. How about you, Dr. Gonzalez? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to say that I've been hearing a lot, future-proof yourself, get ready for the future. And we need to adapt, and we need to essentially, prepare ourselves every single day for that future. And it seems to me, that we forget at times that this future doesn't really exist. It doesn't happen to us. We create it, every single day by the decisions we make, the actions we take, the work we do, the research we conduct. So the future of learning is actually the present, what we are doing right now to build that future. So the key questions that we need to answer here are, exactly what we want to have, what we want to do, how we want to operate now to develop that future, and how we can maximize all the resources, whether it's knowledge, technology, processes, now, to create that kind of future. Because more than future-proofing ourselves, we need to be very creative, to solve the current problems, overcome the present challenges, so that that future can be the vision that we have, and be ready, yes, but now, because the future doesn't just happen, it's the sum of all the actions. So that's fundamental, because every time I hear future-proof yourself, future-proof, it seems that, it's something that is going to happen to me sooner or later, and it's not really that, Learning and development, and the future of learning and development is already here, and it's the result of what we do. So the best way you can future-proof yourself is by making the best use of all the resources that we have at our disposal now, so that we can develop ideas that will lead to better solutions in the future.
Well, that is very inspirational, and I think that's just a wonderful note to end this panel on. Dr. Alma Gonzalez and Dr. Aous Abdo, thank you both so much for being here. Thank you both for sharing your time, your insights, and all the work that you do.
Thank you, Judy.